okay with other people failing, and letting them know that that's just part of the growth experience.
Yeah.
You know, if you really are in it to help them grow and not just for your own needs, for your own business to grow, if it really is a servant leadership, part of learning is failing.
Hello, my friend, and welcome to this Wednesday episode of A Call to Leadership. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, your host, and every single Wednesday I have an episode where I invite an expert to come on the program. We talk about some real issues in leadership. This week, we talk about people. How do we navigate relationships with our people as leaders? Where do we learn to serve them? We're going to dig in. I've invited Matt Barbey, who has expertise in this area. He's a business leadership coach who has seen great success and improvements with his people. He's going to help us to peer in. Can't wait for you to join us. I'm Dr. Nate Sala, and this is A Call to Leadership. Learning.
Yeah.
Inventing, exploring, this aspect of exploration is, I think, an important part of leadership.
Absolutely.
Right. So like when I define leadership, and our listeners would probably have heard me say this before. Well, first of all, there's lots of definitions for leadership and lots of scholars and so forth. Well, I had to define leadership for my PhD work. And so I distilled leadership, and I figured if I could distill it in 10 words, around 10 words, even 10 words or less, I would say that leadership is the discovery of, influence toward, and achievement of, at least good leadership, shared purpose. So three elements and wrapped in a fourth. So leaders are discoverers. We have to envision and chart a way to go to where we think is better than here, ultimately.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. Yeah.
There's got to be some utility, some value proposition.
Yeah. And
then we have to influence others to join along with us on this journey, on this adventure of discovery. And then hopefully, if you're a good leader, you will achieve and reach some destination that you all share, a shared destination, shared purpose, shared rationale, shared reason. And so like even me starting a podcast, there's so much discovery,
right?
As with you, what you started, and even to this day, we continue to discover.
Yeah. Do
you find, as a coach, as a consultant, do you find in your practice where leaders have lost that je ne sais quoi, that I don't know what, that fire or that spark in their eye for discovery? Because I see it in people's eyes sometimes.
Yeah.
They've been down the road and you just don't see that lion's hunger to newly discover.
Yeah. And there's kind of a couple of factors there. I think some people are more geared towards being that visioneer, if you will, visionary, if you will. And they've got big dreams, big goals. And there are other entrepreneurs, or, well, let's just say business owners, because entrepreneurs is kind of a different mindset than business owner, and entrepreneur has a little bit more, I think, vision to it. A business owner, sometimes they just knew that they wanted to be their own boss, or they had no choice but to become their own boss because of layoffs or whatever. And so it didn't necessarily start from some big grand vision. Actually, I was talking to one of my clients about leadership, and I asked him, I'm like, so what is a great leader to you? And what's interesting, this individual's in the skilled trades. What's interesting is his response was, well, I started my company because I just knew that I kind of worked for and I wanted to be better than him.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah. Which he didn't really tell me what good leadership looked like. He gave me the baseline. So I asked him, I said, well, okay. Thank you for that. But is that really your vision for great leadership, or is just that just a baseline that you don't want to fall below?
Was he in some sense stating what the opposite was? Like bad leadership,
more or less,
is a leader that you would not want to follow anymore. Somebody that is causing you to lose hope
Yeah.
in the possibility
Right.
that you share a purpose
Yeah.
and a destination that ultimately you both want to go to.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, ultimately, I think that's what he's saying. I've lost that in one sentence.
Right. Right. So, you know, and I wouldn't say that he's necessarily one that kind of lost fire in his eyes necessarily by any means, but he didn't necessarily maybe have as strong of a fire as he could have because his vision was being better than the right.
Right.
So is it a lost thing, or is it, where did they start? Now, of course, if it's a lost vision, if it's a lost fire, I should say, then there was something that happened that probably diminished their belief in it, right? I mean, it was something like they were going, they had the fire, and then life hit them, or obstacles hit them, or it was just too much to handle. And it's just like, well, I'm overwhelmed. Maybe I've lost belief in my own vision. I maybe could be even health issues, so like there's something that probably hit them. But yeah, definitely run into those folks, but it's critical. That's why I do typically start with like mission and vision and try to get them back to their why.
Yeah.
And when we start, regardless of whether or not they think it's clear or they've got that passion, sometimes they've got some passion, but they've never articulated it in a way that they can communicate to others as well. So
you bring something up, and different circumstances can influence how we, our motivation, but even in drive, so to speak, right?
Yeah.
Even in academic leadership theory, people don't say, well, leaders are this. They say people closely associate the perception of leadership with these traits or behaviors, right? So one of them is certainly drive and motivation. And it reminds me of a report I was watching about a month and a half ago. And this is not a plug for any political candidate to start, but I was watching a report, and it was on, it was out of 60 Minutes in Australia, and they're not huge Biden fans already. So you can kind of tell where this is going, but the way he was handling the pullout from Afghanistan.
Sure.
And the terminology they used really, like, it really hit me in terms of like leadership perception. And what the person was saying was that a lot of the leadership community, and as far as international leaders, considered Biden, at least in this framework, to be weak and indecisive. Those are really powerful words. Yeah. Whether he is or not, this is not the time to talk about that. But we're talking about perceptions of leadership.
Well, perception is important.
It is important.
Everything, really.
Yeah. So a leader that's described as weak and indecisive, we can probably all agree it's not a compliment. Yeah. And so the opposite of that would be strong and decisive. And, when we talk about fire, we are talking about strength, I think, in some ways, and decisiveness in some ways. Yeah. But it's really interesting. Yeah. It is interesting. I think about this stuff a lot in terms of even personality. And because I know I'm sure you're familiar with the DISC. And for the listeners out there who might not be familiar with it, that's a personality assessment and personality and kind of communication assessment, we'll say. And it kind of boils down, personalities and communication styles to four main areas: D being more dominant, I being more like the influencer, they're being kind of more that social butterfly, still relationship based. D's, I guess, are more like task accomplishment based. I's are more relationship based, and then S's, that's steadiness or steadfastness, and that they really kind of they don't necessarily like a lot of change. They like deeper relationships as opposed to more relationships. And C's, they're kind of they're more task driven, but more detail driven. Conscientiousness is a C. So, but I just bring that up because the D's, those drivers, the more dominant type people, oftentimes you see that a lot in entrepreneurship. You see that a lot in business owners because, they've got a certain idea of what's better, and they're going to go out there and they're going to make it happen. Yeah. It's part of their personality. So a lot of times I see, because they're so confident in what they're doing, they're so confident in
my way is going to be the best way, that it naturally instills confidence in other people, and to a degree, depending on
what values they share.
Yeah, what values they share and all that. But a lot of times people kind of look at them and be like, oh, that's a great example of leadership, because they're dominant and they're confident, and they're just going to go out there and they're going to drive and make it happen. Although, while I think that's important and they're strong and decisive, it doesn't necessarily always lead to the best results.
Correct.
Yeah.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
So, and I agree. In fact, there's another assessment, the PI, the predictive index. And so
very similar.
I have a leadership group that, and I've seen it in other leadership groups that I've been a part of. Many of the people in those groups we'll consider mavericks.
Right. Yeah.
So these are the, my way, I drive, very low need for any type of formality. They just want to just go. Yeah. And, you've heard this before, right? Many entrepreneurs are ready, fire, aim.
Yeah.
and that doesn't necessarily make for great decision making either. And I think, to your point, right? Yeah. So strong and decisive, can have its challenges even when we use that terminology. And I wonder, I wonder how many good leaders are misjudged externally because they don't possess that dominance or high extroversion. I don't know. What was your disc? Do you know what your disc was?
Mine actually is see if I can remember. It's been a little while that I've taken it. Like, my D was not like too high, in terms of, so I wasn't necessarily a dominant. I think it was kind of a S. I mean, it was actually pretty even.
Oh, okay.
But I think, actually S and C were pretty high. I'm trying to remember. Man, it's been too long. I wasn't prepared.
Maybe you should take it again.
Go back and take it again. Yeah, because
it might be a little different now.
It can. Yeah.
Yeah. I took mine. Mine was most high I, and then D was the second. Yeah. Which is totally would make sense, because I'm very social. Yeah. But I'm also very driven. But it takes a back seat. Yeah. When I'm in an environment where there's collaboration, I would rather collaborate than dominate.
Yeah.
And so that's why I like teams. I like group think. I like decision making as a whole. I don't like unilateral decision, at least in my organizations. Agreed. And I actually encourage other leaders who I get the opportunity to be involved with to ask those kind of questions. And I actually had a guy, one of my students I want to use the word afraid. I will use the word afraid to ask his team their opinion on a decision, because he had this belief that if he asked their opinion, it would be a sign of weakness.
Interesting. Yeah. Yeah.
And so we had to reframe that thinking.
Yeah.
To say, look, your team they're going to be the ones that will help you to come up with ideas you never knew that you had collectively. There's such great synergy. Plus, you involving them in the decision making in the process also helps them to take ownership.
Absolutely, yeah.
Of this journey.
Yeah.
So go ask what they think. You're not weak, and you're not showing that you're not a good leader. You're actually a better leader, I think, when you can release some of that control.
Absolutely. I think so much is put onto the shared vision. And to me, that's kind of like more of like everybody just working for a shared vision and a shared goal. It's not quite like a team. That's more of a work group. But I think the strong leaders know how to understand and maybe even help others clarify their own personal visions and their own personal motivations, and help them understand how that ties into the greater vision. And then if you can have a group of people who not only share that shared vision and are working towards that, but they understand each other's personal motivations and how that all ties together, and they're in it to help each other achieve their own personal goals as a part of this shared vision, to me, that's a stronger team.
Agreed.
And that's a stronger leader.
Yeah. It reminds me, I was having a conversation with a new hire about 2 months ago.
Yeah.
And when I bring people on, it's very intentional, very methodical, and creating and protecting the culture. So entry into the culture is protected by these barriers and boundaries of entry, so that everyone in the culture understands that their I don't want to call it an ideology, but certainly the beliefs that we share are protected. And some argue this is, there's, I don't want to go down this rabbit hole, but like tribalism versus sort of openness, but certainly there are aspects of your culture that are directly related to your value system and as it should be. But when I brought the new hire in, I said, one of my primary responsibilities, primary goals, primary objectives is to help you operate in your genius zone.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And so there may be some areas that you don't always operate in that, and that's fine, but that's the goal, to just continue to move you into your genius zone as we row together to this shared destination that we are all super excited to reach.
Yeah.
And you could see, man, just the countenance just change. And it was almost like it was a little weird to hear that, right? And the new hire said, I'm not really sure exactly what to say, because this is foreign talk to me. I've never heard an employer or any leader in my life, I'm not going to go into detail, right? say that. And you just saw, as that individual walked out of my office, just like 2 feet taller.
Yeah.
And it's the truth. And I think this is part of what you're talking about, right? Mm-hmm. Like, what Absolutely. Is, where are you? And so having this intense intimacy, if you will, of servant leadership.
Yeah. I love the model of servant leadership, because it really does, I don't know if force, but it does encourage you. Yeah, we'll say force. It does kind of force you to think about other people. Mm-hmm. And empathy is, I think, critical as part of that. Yes. As being a strong leader, empathy is key. And one of the communication is really, those conversations around that is really where I start, like, with a lot of clients. Like, one of the first books I encourage them to read is Everyone Communicates, Few Connect, by John Maxwell, because it's important in leadership, and people also don't necessarily always equate as a business owner, entrepreneur. They don't understand how it's not only leadership within the team, but like leadership to clients, and empathy to understand what's going on in their heads and hearts, and how do you best create the kind of company that's going to make them happy. But you have that externally and internally that you have to really, so I think the strongest leaders and the strongest business owner leaders understand that empathy, and trying to get into other people's heads and trying to figure out what makes them tick, and how can I help them to get to where they want to be in the future as we're all moving towards where we want to go as a group.
Yeah. And I think it's in moving in a direction that empathy is being more widely embraced. I think at some point it was certainly considered weakness. Yeah. In leadership.
Absolutely.
And now with Brené Brown's vulnerability sort of movement and recognizing the power in that, and in shared context, is moving us forward in how we are ultimately able to help each other. I mean, Robert Greenleaf said this in 1970. So, we're talking 50 years ago, half a century. And so totally ahead of his time. But he was talking about the servant leader. He said the servant leader, first and foremost, wants to serve. Yeah. But then he said there's a litmus test, and I'm paraphrasing, but he says the litmus test is if we're actually operating in servant leadership, the litmus test, and he said it's hard to administer, difficult to administer, are those who are following a servant leader, are they Are they wiser, freer, more autonomous, healthier, more likely themselves to become servant leaders? And then he takes it a step further, and then he says, what about the least deprived in society? Are they at least not further deprived? I mean, the guy was like, I mean, he was hitting hard, right? I mean, that cuts you right to the gut. But I think it's a beautiful way to illustrate, some of the benefits, I guess you'd say, of leading through service. And I think it's not weakness. Actually, I think it's strength.
Yeah.
I think that when you are secure in yourself, that you don't have all the insecurities and all the baggage, that you're worried about how people perceive you, when you're only focused on the highest priority needs of those who are called to walk alongside of you, it takes you completely out of the equation. And I think there's a great strength to that. And I think it's really attractive and beautiful.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, it's interesting, even kind of like, I mean, again, not trying to get political, but like, even, if in that move to try to, get people out of Afghanistan, if there was more of an attempt to show that they, I think a care of whoever was, like the Americans that were there and the people who had supported Americans there and all that stuff. I mean, standing up and making sure they were taken care of. It's interesting because there might have been a sense of weakness of pulling out or whatever that some people might have thought, but then to showing that you care about the people, I wonder how that would have been viewed differently, in the world's eyes there, kind of that missed opportunity, if you will. Just kind of, as you're talking, it's kind of made me think about that, but
yeah. Like, where is compassion in leadership, whether it's political, whether it's in a community, whether it's in a educational environment, in a school, in an office, at home. Yeah. It reminds me of at the end of the 9th chapter of Matthew, Jesus is looking at the crowds, and in one of the versions it says they were helpless and harassed, and he had compassion on them.
Yeah, absolutely.
And of course, then he says the harvest is plenty, the workers are few. And of course, he wants to call others to share in his compassion for people.
Just as you're hitting upon the harvest is plenty, but the workers are few. I was just thinking about the Great Resignation.
Wow.
And how we really see the example of how people, I think, are really wanting that servant leadership these days. And it's been a struggle. I mean, it's been a struggle I've seen in the skilled trades, because we've been helping people get, I know I'm moving around here making noises, but we've seen people try and help people recruit in the skilled trades, and it's tough, but that's been happening for years. And it's interesting because, there's a lot of stuff that's been marketed, to negatively influence skilled trades and all that stuff and make it look bad. But at the same time, there's some responsibility that I put back on my clients and saying, like, look, just as we were talking about the client who had the kind of the quote unquote, who we worked for before, historically speaking, we haven't seen we haven't seen strong leadership in the construction skilled trades field. At least that's not the overall perception. Yeah. You go there, you're harassed, you're made fun of. It's a hard workplace. Hey, you're not manly enough. If you can't deal with that, that kind of stuff. And I think that's a great example of where there was I think a very strong lack of caring about their employees. They would make fun of people, and they still make fun of people who actually try to take care of their employees. I've got to cater to them. I'm giving a paycheck. Right. You still see a lot of that, but I think that's that lack of that servant leadership mindset of how do I create a company? How do I create a situation that is great for everyone? That is great for the people that I'm trying to set a vision for has really hurt them. Well,
and there's a cost. Yeah. I mean, to that mindset of they get a paycheck. That's all that I really owe them.
Yeah,
it's true.
Yeah,
and when that paycheck does not outweigh unemployment, then that's all they owe you.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, it's a two-way street.
Right.
And so that's part of, I think, now, of course, there's lots and lots of factors with this great resignation. I'm glad you even brought it up. But I think we can hang our hats on the experience people are having.
Yeah.
Whether or not it leads them to want to continue to take steps with us on this journey as leaders, whether they're in an organizational context or whatnot, or not. Yeah. And so, like, for example, in my organization, and I don't want this to come off as though it's gloating, but I really enjoy the people I work with. Yeah. And we all enjoy working with each other. Absolutely. And so, like, if there's an opportunity for unemployment, they'll say, and of course they could, but they say, no, I'd rather be here.
Right.
Because we're part of, we're doing something to improve the human condition. Yeah. We're doing something to make the world, I mean, I know it sounds like a cliche, but it's just a little bit better. Well,
you gotta play in your 3 feet, right?
Right.
You can't necessarily always do everything that changes the world, on a grand scale. But if we have everybody taking charge and trying to better the world, at least in the 3 feet around them that surrounds them. But if they get that, but a lot of people forget that. But I think a good leader helps them remember that does impact. Right. It does have a ripple effect.
It has a ripple effect. Yeah. And you see the ripple now. Yeah. You see it at the grocery stores, and you see it at the Golden Corral and at restaurants, and you see, hey, we really have a huge shortage. Yeah. And it's difficult to turn the corner when the foundation has already been laid. That doesn't necessarily, and I'm not saying this is every organization because I don't want to put a blanket statement over it, but that doesn't show that this is an environment where you will be able to rise far more than not. And I think that's ultimately what people want. I mean, I think Daniel Pink, when he wrote his book, I think it was Drive, he talked about, purpose, mastery, and autonomy being strong motivators for people in the workplace, right? So you give them a sense of purpose, you give them a sense of mastery, give them a sense of autonomy. When money's off the table, it's likely that they'll be more engaged, higher performance, better results, less turnover, and so on. And so the interesting thing is, you said, when many employers, even to this day, look at money as, the transactional aspect of it. This is the end all be all, and take it or leave it. And I think they're starting to see, we got a problem. Houston, we have a problem here.
No, I love that you brought that up too, because I have a great example of a client who was having a particular employee who was kind of starting, it was fairly new, but starting to decline because he was having some issues with another employee, and just it's labor, skilled trade, and I said to him, like, well, have you sat down and really kind of shared a bigger vision of what you're trying to do for him, and then but also, like, first, like, understood his vision, like, what does he want for his life, where does he want to go? And so he took him out to dinner, and they kind of had that conversation, and then he also shared, like, I'm not. Because a lot of business owners are they're afraid that if they give away all the keys to the kingdom, somebody's going to take all that knowledge and run and start a competitor, right? But I've always said, like, the risk is that they're going to do it anyway, and they're going to, instead of you having a particular another opportunity to maybe start another location with them or become a business partner, you now have a competitor, right? But if you actually work with them to help them understand that, so he actually sat down. It's like, look, he understood his goals, and he talked about it. It's like, well, because the individual, he did want to, potentially be able to start his own business in the future. And, he had some big plans. He said, well, that's what I want for you. I want you to feel like the knowledge that I give you, I want you to feel more like a business owner, and that you can, you're going to be able to set up and do this on your own if one day. as opposed to just, an employee that I'm just trying to keep down. And after that conversation, he saw that a huge uptick in productivity and motivation. Yes. I mean, this guy's setting his own goals and hitting them out of the park. And it was just huge. And my client does have an idea that he'd like to open up multiple locations in the future, or maybe franchise or license or something like that. So he's already got somebody who's primed, who's excited about that opportunity, who he could actually have a business partner rather than a competitor in the future.
Love it. Yeah. It reminds me of this story of a CEO and a CFO in a budget meeting. And some people might have heard this story where the CFO is complaining about this cost, training and education costs, and said, what if we spend all this money on these people and they leave?
Yeah.
Or CEO is thinking much, much larger.
Right.
Saying, well, what if they don't? And what if we don't and they stay?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, totally. Like, okay, so you want to, not invest in your people because you think they're going to leave with it. But then if you don't invest in them and they stay, you've got a environment that will not lead to the kind of productivity that will ultimately reach the goals that you hope you'd want.
Yeah.
I love the aspect of helping your people understand their greater vision, whether or not it's on the longer road with you.
Yeah.
I had an accountant working for me who, what I thought was going to be kind of my next protege.
Yeah.
And so through that time, trained in all this and prepared. And this person came into my office a few years after starting with me, and almost tears. And I said, what's going on? And said, you've just inspired me to want to try to do it and make it on my own. This person actually tried on their own at first, and then I brought him in.
Oh,
and then couldn't make it work and spent time with me. Yeah. And I said, well, that's fantastic. And just not the expected response.
Right. Yeah.
And I said, absolutely. You have my blessing. I'm honored.
Yeah.
And sure, there's going to be obviously transitional, some things that we have to do, but all the work you've been doing, others will be blessed and benefit from being able to take over that book. Right. I mean, we'll make it work. And to this day, that individual still comes to me and like, hey, Nate, I'm having this problem or that. Yeah. And maybe I still want to come back because entrepreneurship or running my own business it's a headache. And I'm like, no, you hang in there and, you'll get through it. But it's such a healthy and liberating approach. And I think liberation, freedom, really, autonomy. Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Daniel Pink, he got it right. And so and I think it all goes back to, these perceptions of leadership and reframing our own perceptions as leaders.
Yeah.
And I think some ways, some of the fears we have as business owners or as leaders, fearing that somebody will take our intellectual property or whatever it might look like.
Right. Yeah.
But I think we need to take a hard look at how we are preparing the people who are serving alongside of us.
Yeah.
Now more than ever.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I think that historically, if you look at schools and really what they set us up to be, I mean, they were like the formalization around schools was, I think, kind of around that industrial age where they were trying to kind of create a good system to get good, employees that would just kind of do the stuff at the factories, then they were just going to be good factory workers. And so a lot of that stuff, I think, really still carries over to the school systems of today. And I know that there's teachers who are out there working really hard so I mean, there are some great cases of people out there working really hard, but unfortunately I still see people still seem to kind of come out of school, at least, grade school and high school, not really prepared to live autonomously and to think autonomously necessarily.
Approach life as from mastery or purpose. Right. Yeah. All three of those real.
Yeah.
You're right.
But there's still something I think inherent that they need. And the reason I bring this up is because I see in these younger generations that are getting into the workforce, they almost need to be guided and coached to understand this inherent need better. I mean, I've talked to a lot of folks from the younger generation. It's almost like there's that need in there, but then also there's almost like this fear because there's so much that's going on for the younger generations, climate change and war in Afghanistan and this and that. Like they almost like feel like they're going to die of something before they can ever achieve anything in life. So it's kind of like a morose mindset that many of the younger generation have. But even with this gentleman who was talking to somebody who is, I think, really 18 or 19 years old, somewhere around there, who didn't necessarily, he went out to dinner, and before that he's saying like, I don't really necessarily know, trying to kind of figure out life. I'm just trying to, pay the bills and figure out that next step. To take that time to coach somebody to think through that, to understand their own need for autonomy, which is inherent in human nature. I mean, that's part of what, you see that as you go from being a kid to a teenager to a young adult. I mean, that's inherently a part of the human condition, I think, of people wanting at least some level of autonomy and feeling like they can stand on their own to a degree. Yeah.
And preparing them for it.
Yeah.
And challenging them. I think that I struggle with that. And at least I've been trying to identify it as I move through being a parent.
Yeah.
Because I grew up with a lot of autonomy because I grew up without a father figure. My mom was an independent, entrepreneur, single mom. And I was really like extremely, I don't want to say ambitious as much as just a hard-headed, do it my own way. Yeah. I was just going to fall into every issue I face. I just knew I was going to have some war wounds. So I was just going to just head first, independence. But those struggles built my character.
Yeah.
And then, so as a parent who has, grown up poor and all that, then having some level of comfort later, of course, working and having some level of success, then you wonder, okay, well, do the kids that now don't have that same type of struggle or circumstances, building their grit, their mental toughness, how will they fare in an autonomous environment?
Yeah.
And so I've been trying to create mental toughness and struggles in the children that I've been blessed to walk alongside.
Yeah.
And it's an interesting sort of kind of road because they're manufactured, right? Yeah. It's sort of okay, well, let's create this struggle for you. Right. Yeah. To see if we can create some character building. Yeah. Like my son, for example, he wanted to start a Roblox business. Well, he was playing a video game. Yeah. And so I asked him, can you monetize it? Obviously, hey, look, if you're going to have fun, see if you can make some money at it too. Why not? Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
When I was young, they called me Captain Capitalism. So that was certainly, of course, all the socialists that are listening now are like, what? No, there's opportunity everywhere. And so I want to open his mind to the possibilities for opportunity, because if he can create something, then he can put people to work and they can benefit too, and so on and so forth, and enjoyment. So I say, why don't you see if you can monetize this Roblox thing? And he says, okay, Dad. And then I say, well, you're going to need some money to get it going. And because it's basically a video game within a video game, there's an entire, so he builds his own.
Yeah. So he builds his own kind of like worlds and games within Roblox, because it allows you to kind of like program your own stuff. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so he's like, well, I need some cash. So, well, you need to go on Shark Tank. And he's like, well, I can't get on Shark Tank, Dad. I'm 13 years old. I said, well, you can do family Shark Tank. So he creates his business plan and he pitches me, and I sent him away. I'm out. So I told him. It was a lot of fun, actually. He said, what? Yeah. I said, I'm out. I said, go watch a few more episodes of the show. He went and watched a few more episodes of Shark Tank, comes back with another round. Like, no, it's still not good enough. I'm out. I give him some pointers.
Yeah.
He comes back a third time. It's close enough.
Yeah.
So I invest. And so I invest. We become, I told him you can 51%, I'll do 49. Way you're the controlling owner, right? Mm-hmm. So over the course of a year, he goes through $600 and he's got these other kids developing and he's building it out and he's doing some advertising and things like that. And during the course of that year, he is like, Dad, this is so hard. He's like, I know that Dad, you're a successful entrepreneur. I know I'm going to be successful. You teach people how to be entrepreneurs and all this other stuff. I'm like, Abram, there are no guarantees. Mm-hmm. Now, you will have more tools and resources by the company you keep and by what you learn. Absolutely. And I strongly encourage that for everyone. However, there's no free pass, right?
Yeah.
So anyway, so he's having trouble. He's like, Dad, these developers, they won't start on time. They won't finish on time. The work they do is cruddy, all this stuff, right? And after a year goes by, he comes in and says, Dad, I'm folding it up. I'm so sorry. I lost your money, but I'm done. My passion's just gone.
Lost the fire.
I lost the fire in my eye. Right. And I said, he said, I'm a failure. I said, well, let's talk it through. What was the purpose of this game? He said it was because I wanted to make a really cool game. I said, no, that wasn't the purpose. The purpose was that you can learn about business. Yeah. And learn how it operates on some fundamental level. This is dot one for you. Mm-hmm. Said, did you learn about business? He said, I don't know, Dad. I don't know. I said, well, let's sit down. I want you to write down what you learned. So first thing he writes down is, no matter how much money I think I'm going to need more, a lot more. Good. All right. What's number 2? No matter how much time I think it's going to take more time. It's like, okay, great. He said, I said, what's number 3? He writes down, don't ever give anyone power unless they've earned it.
Interesting. Yeah.
Okay. And these are some of the guys he has, quote unquote, working for him on the game, right?
Right.
I said, what's number 4? He said, get everything in writing before you commit. Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, great. And I said, well, what's number 5? He said, don't lose your dad's money. I said, no, Abram, you didn't lose my money. Let me tell you something. I teach MBA students, right? Yeah. And you're getting an advanced level of education, and that $600 will probably be the best $600 I ever spent on your learning, because you've learned things that I had to learn when I was in my 20s after I was in my own business. They will stick. And when you're ready, and this becomes dot 2 or dot 3, you'll have it with you. Yeah. And that's one of the ways I've tried to create the character building in a controlled environment. Right. So that he's not like me when I was 22, 23 with, negative $30,000 in my bank account on one day and having nearly an ulcer because I can't make payroll because stuff happons. Yeah. Yeah. That you're not, that you can't foresee. So anyway.
No, that's a great example. And I think it does kind of bring it back around to, even the losing the fire in the eyes, but sometimes what I think kind of what you did was you kind of brought it back around to the greater mission, the greater vision, and I mean, it's somewhat cliche to say, but it's so inherently true that leadership also you have to be willing to fail and not just for yourself to be able to fail, but like let other people know that it's okay to fail and be okay with other people failing, and letting them know that that's just part of the growth experience. Yeah. If you really are in it to help them grow and not just for your own needs, for your own business to grow, if it really is a servant leadership, part of learning is failing.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that's also part of delegating. And I guess as Wickman would say, delegate and elevate. especially like if for the business owner or any type of leader who is maybe a bit like me, where they like to work and they like to hone a skill, and then someone else is coming along and you need to delegate, but maybe that the quality of that product or that service or the result won't be up to that highest level because they haven't had the time to hone it.
Right.
And you've got to delegate. You've got to give them opportunity to make the kind of mistakes that you did.
Yeah.
And so because you can never really scale in an effective way without giving up some of that. And of course you can do it in a way that doesn't diminish the value offering or the service offering. I think Pixar does this really well. I was reading, I think it was Ed Catmull that wrote about, Creativity Inc., where he talked about how Pixar, they try to make as many mistakes as possible, sort of pre-production.
Yeah.
And get all of those mistakes worked out so that when it comes to prime time, they've got to work. And I would think that professional sports and different areas use the same kind of philosophy. Yeah. I wouldn't maybe even the military.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually I was reading a great article about Jeff Bezos and one of his strongest skills. And it was talking about how they were flying out to Europe for some sort of meeting, and they realized that they needed another capacity. They needed another function. And so they found one of the team members found that there was a company in a different European country that was doing what they needed. He's like, all right, I'm gonna go talk to the captain, and we're gonna change the flight, and we're gonna go land there. We're gonna go buy them. And everybody else who were on that plane with them, like, whoa, wait, let's talk about this first, So it ended up that they didn't necessarily change flights immediately or change routes immediately, but it just was kind of into his mindset of kind of the default to action,
right?
And I think that's kind of cool. And I have to kind of have that reminder for myself, because I'm not necessarily like that high D person. I like to win, but it's not, but I to me, I'm always looking at the people and how do we win together and collaborate and stuff like that. So sometimes, you have to kind of know yourself and know that you have to kind of push yourself in some ways. But so I love that idea of default to action and be okay with the failure, act and say, what, it's going to be a learning experience, and I'm going to do it, see what happens, and then move on. Because so many people, they try to make the perfect product as opposed to the minimum viable product or the minimum viable action, if you will.
Mm-hmm. That's right. Yeah.
To learn from. So this has been a great talk. I really appreciate you having me on the show, or the podcast, and hopefully some people got some value out of it. But, I think that, if you can not only understand your own value and your own mission and your own vision, and you can help your other people, your team members, understand theirs and build a system where everybody's winning in their own ways, in the big ways. I think that's key.
I agree. I totally agree. I'm so glad that you joined me today, because it even reinvigorates my objective to have empathy, vulnerability, to really invest in the people who I am called to walk alongside. I mean, it's gold.
Absolutely.
It's gold. Absolutely. And it'll pay dividends.
Yeah. It always does. When again, you have to know that you're going to fail in it in some ways, and not everybody's going to always be perfect. And sometimes you do have to, as a strong leader, sometimes if somebody's vision doesn't match yours, you do have to help them find a place where their vision is going to. Yeah.
Yeah. No, I'm glad you brought that up, because I think that, before we wrap up, it is important to make sure that we are, in terms of decisiveness, that we're clear. This is where we're going.
Yeah.
And if you desire to go there, then this is going to be a fit for you.
Yeah.
If you do not, let's try to find the direction for you. Yeah. I've said it like this. I don't even use the term firing. Of course, I like to call it freeing your future.
Opening more opportunity.
Yeah. But in the past, and I haven't had to do it in a good while, but in the past, when I always get responses from the people that I freed futures for later down the line with thankfulness. And because it's difficult for me, and I'm sure for many people, it's difficult.
Yeah.
Now we can have another conversation all around, well, what mistakes we make on the front end in terms of the recruiting and the hiring process. We're talking about today, right? If you're in a position to where maybe the vision doesn't align.
Yeah.
It's okay.
Yeah.
It's okay to say, let's just part ways. And I want you to go where your vision is going to be realized, because that's where you're going to thrive the most.
Yeah, I don't even like calling it disciplinary action. I think it's coaching, counseling. It's reorienting. Hey, is this vision fit for you? Great. Does this role fit for you? Is this where you're operating in your genius? Great. If it's not, then let me help you figure out where that better place would be, and let's work to make sure that you're going to be in the best place. Because, maybe it comes around where later on they might be in a better place, or maybe it comes around later that they send you some referrals, or at least at the very least, it's not somebody out there who's got a negative view of your company. I mean, plus it hones your skills and lets everybody know that they're safe to be who they are, regardless of whether it's a fit for your company or not, that you're going to support them regardless.
Yeah. I love that. Okay. Before we close, I have a question for you.
Okay.
And I didn't coach you on this question, so I know it's going to come up. I know it's going to come out of left field.
All right.
One day, we're all going to be on the mountaintop, right? I mean, the great summit, if you will, of our lives toward the end of when we hang our hats. And so as you're looking down, I'm just curious, what is it? What is one sentence that you would want people to have said about you?
I think the one sentence that I would love people to say about me is that I helped them achieve a bigger vision than what they even thought possible for themselves.
I love it.
Yeah.
Beautiful. Where can people find you?
They can find me at timeforsuccess.io, but also we have a podcast, and hopefully we can get you scheduled for my podcast as well. Entrepreneurs Ascending. It's not just a podcast, it's a call to action.
Come on.
But it's for preach it, brother. Yeah. So, and it really is geared towards a small business owner who they've seen especially for the past year and a half, big business doing so well, protected by the government, where a small business has been kind of left to struggle, and it really is it's meant to be a call to action, because you're supposed to take what we talk about and put it into action to help your small business thrive, grow, build greater relationships with your clients, build greater relationships with your employees and your community, and really be able to take it to the next level, from that solopreneur or business owner to that entrepreneur, and that big impact within your community as well. So
I love it, man. I'm so thankful to God for you, and just our friendship continue to develop. And I just know we've got great things ahead.
Absolutely.
I want to have you back, because we need to have this conversation go just another direction, because there's so much to talk about. Yeah.
I think that this conversation is absolutely phenomenal, and so critical these days, as we're just now really starting to understand, I think, as a society, what real leadership is. Yeah. At least in the corporate and in the business world. Yeah. So I agree. Yeah. It's beautiful. Thank you. Thank you for coming. Absolutely.